Good afternoon, folks. So my name is David James. I'm the course director for games design at the University of Staffordshire in the West Midlands. This is just a quick sort of overview on this slide of my career trajectory. Course director, if you're not familiar or if you don't have equivalent in your institution, it's like a deputy head of department. I teach, I do some research, but I also line manage a selection of staff, which became somewhat relevant to my application. The reason for this slide more than anything is just to show you sort of what my career looked like from the get-go. But in my application, I did touch on all stages of my career. It wasn't just where I am now in sort of the management position. There was a lot that I touched on. Indeed, as my colleague has said, in professional support as well, when I worked in regulations and compliance. The main change you can see in that little table, that little diagram there, excuse me, is my haircut got more and more ridiculous, and I got more and more crow's feet and sort of wrinkles, but that part of the course, right? Next slide, please. Thank you. So I stuck on this slide just a sort of a scatter shot of some of the criteria on one. This isn't everything, but it was just some of the more sort of varied examples. Mainly, it was to do with how I fix things like problem modules, so modules with really poor pass rates that I inherited, or really poor student feedback, which I inherited. And I was able to very quickly kind of fix those by changing the content, the learning materials, making them more polished, changing the assessment. And I was able to demonstrate, sort of with figures basically that the modules had improved
Mm.
very quickly under sort of my guidance. So that was a big one. I also talked about some of the leadership I did during COVID. I was very keen on our online delivery being really kind of polished and sort of entertaining and interesting, sort of informed by YouTube and Twitch that was really sort of taking off at the time. And that was picked up by the department, and I was able to sort of, demonstrate that. My research is in the area of games design pedagogy. So it's literally on teaching games. So that's my PhD area, and I've got a bunch of papers out to do with that. So I was directly able to sort of talk about the relevance to my teaching and from a research perspective. Because I make games as teaching tools, I also make them for fun as well. And so many of these teaching tools have been turned into full-blown games, which have then gone on to win very, very luckily industry awards. And what that means is I can go to students and say, you are working with a tool or you're working on a game that is award-winning and you're contributing to that in some form. And that's got great value. On the right hand side, I sort of talked about how I'd worked across the institution. So not just sort of like in a classroom, and there's a big part of this I think people can pick up on. I worked with the marketing team to sort of come up with a video vodcast of like a meet the academics kind of thing, where we talk about our favorite games, and potential applicants can watch these videos and see how interested we are and passionate about this industry and this field. But then I also worked, perhaps a bit more, less glitz and glamoury, but worked with the quality team extensively to do things like course validations. It hasn't got all of the sort of the excitement of marketing, but most people can do that by reaching out to your quality departments and seeing how you can contribute there, because that has an impact. That has an impact on what you ultimately end up delivering. I also am fortunate enough to chair the teaching and learning committee within the games department, which is quite a big department in itself. And so there's lots of impact I could demonstrate there. Outside of that, though, one of the other things I did mention is I'm a voluntary governor at a secondary school where I'm responsible for teaching and learning. And so there was some, I put myself in some positions where I could get that extra evidence of impact. I also talk a little bit about criterion 2 and 3 as well. Is that okay for me to sort of rattle through as well?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Awesome. Okay, I'll sort of blast that a little bit. Raising the profile of excellence, so that's bringing up people around you. That was easier for me to do, I think, in some regard, because
Mhm.
I'm a line manager. I manage 15 academics, and I've taken them from hourly paid part-time to senior
Mm.
lecturer over several years. So there was some immediate stuff there, and I know not everybody's in that position. However, there are lots of other things that I think people can do, whether you're a line manager or not. I talked about policies that I'd implemented and were felt across the department from teaching and learning committee. But then I did get a bunch of quotes from graduates who are in the games industry directly talking about how my teaching prepared them for that industry. But then, really interesting, this was one of my favorite parts, was quotes from students who've gone into teaching themselves, who directly referred to me as the inspiration for wanting to go into teaching, which was just wonderful, right? And really validating. The other thing I got as well, which we can all do, I suppose, is external examiner comments. So as an external examiner for other institutions, I reached out to those institutions and I was able to get some really supportive quotes and evidence of my impact on their validations and improving their courses. So just impact outside of my institution. Next slide, please. When it came to developing excellence, I talked about the various qualifications I'd got to support and improve my teaching. But, as we've said in this presentation earlier, it's all about applying that back and the impact that comes from that. So I talked about my PGC HPE, but the things I learnt and applied to my classes and the impact that had on my students. I talked about my fellowship at the Higher Education Academy and why that was so important. Again, my PhD in research came out and what I learned from that and how I apply that back into the classroom. In the games industry, the industry changes rapidly with new technology every year. So part of the training I have to make sure I'm doing is making sure I'm up to date and my skills are relevant. And so I go through training myself. And then the impact of that is I ensure that my students have got an up-to-date contemporaneous set of skills, which is critical for this industry. Last slide, please. Just a few general notes in no particular order that I stuck together that I think, that I thought was important for my application. It was about, as we've said earlier, putting yourself in positions where you can demonstrate impacts. That's working across your institution, signing up for things like panels, dealing with student disciplinary complaints, even anything where you can start to get a wider understanding for the student experience, and you can start to factor that back into your own practice. With everything that you do, though, as we've said, noting the impact of you did the thing and what was the impact on the teaching. I know that we can't fill the application with quotes, but I started my draft with an awful lot of quotes and cut them back. And all I'll say on that is that process of getting those quotes from former students, current students, staff, people who've left the institution and work elsewhere, it was incredibly validating. Getting the NTF itself is obviously, the prize and what we're aiming for. But secondary to that was when I put my application in, I was made up. I already felt like I'd won, if you know what I mean. Whether I got the NTF or not, that application itself and all those supporting quotes was really validating. I knew that the thing would come eventually. The last point was I just thought it would be really important. And what I thought was important for my application was have a strong opening. And that quote on the right is literally how I started my context statement, which was from my line manager and mentor. I won't read it, but I thought if I open like this, it sets the tone for what I want to do with the rest of this application. And it went pretty well. So my contact details are there, like my socials and stuff. So yeah, if you want to speak about any of this, I love talking about teaching. I love talking about the NTF. So you can always reach out to me separately. Thank you.